Welcome to our series on Rambam's Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah. We're going to start chapter 4 today, B'ezrat Hashem, as usual in memory of Levi ben Moshe ve'Esther and Elisha ve'Yael ve'Leah ve'Levi, and also Harav Roni Salach ben Avram Ezra. So I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Mashiach. So we're up to the 4th chapter now, and this is the chapter dealing with what we touched on at the end of last perek, which was the 4 elements, namely fire, air, water, and earth, which Rambam is explaining are the spiritual elements that manufacture, so to speak, or form everything that we see composed of matter around us. And we're going to talk about all the various creations that are created from these 4 elements and how they combine, and we'll start now. So chapter 4, Halacha 1, Arba'a gufim halu shehem esh v'ruach u'mayim v'aretz hem yesodot kol hanivraim lamata min harakia. These 4 elements, namely fire, air, water and earth, are the elements of all the creatures beneath the expanse. The expanse refers to anything below the second sphere, which is the sphere of the moon. So the anything below the moon is kind of subject to very rapid change in its matter, in its structure of its matter. Anything above the sphere of the moon, according to Rambam and the knowledge of the time, was more fixed and unchanging. So Rambam continues. V'chol sheyihyeh me'odom u'mebehema ve'of ve'remes ve'dag ve'semach u'matechet ve'avanim tovot u'margliot u'sar avnei binyan v'harim v'gushei afar hakol galman mechubar me'arba yesodot halalu. All these 4 elements, whether it be man, beast, fowl, creeping thing, fish, vegetation, minerals, precious stones, pearls, structural stones, mountains and glaciers, the body of each and every one of them is a joint issue of these 4 elements. Nimtsui kol hagufim shelamata min harakia chutz me'arba yesodot ha'elu mechubarim miglem v'tzura. Consequently, all bodies beneath the expanse, save only these 4 elements, are joint issue of matter and form. V'glem shelahem mechuba me'arba yesodot ha'elu, and the body of each is the joint issue of these 4 elements. Aval kol echad me'arba ha'yesodot eino mechuba ela megolem v'tzura bilvad. But each of these 4 elements is not the composite of anything else except body and form only. So Rambam is saying that the essential ingredients, the essence of everything that we see around us, whether it's the biggest mountain to the smallest mosquito, is a combination of some way of these 4 elements in various forms. Halacha 2, derech ha'esh v'haruach lihios mahalacham memata metabur haaretz lema'ala kalpei harakia. It is the nature of fire and air to go upwards from the center of the earth upwards towards the expanse. So now I'll continue. V'derech hamayim v'haaretz lios mahalacham metachat harakia lemata ad le'emta. And it is the nature of water and earth to direct their movements beneath the expanse towards the center. So Rambam is subcategorizing these 4 elements into 2 categories, and he's saying the nature or the lightness of fire and air force it to go upwards. In other words, and earth and water tend to move downwards. So it's evident if we take a balloon that's filled with air, and we put it underwater and we release it in any way, air will always float upwards in bubbles upwards to escape. As he mentioned, fire, if we light a candle, we know that the flame always is pointing upwards. And he's also mentioning that the nature of water and earth is that they are heavier, and they tend to be magnetically pulled, or however pulled, towards the center, lower. They drop. They are, that's their movement. Their movement is downwards. She'emtza harakia hu hamata she'en lamata mimenu. As the center of the expanse is the lowermost point, that which there is nothing lower. Now we must bear in mind that when the point of reference we're talking about here is the center of the earth, which Rambam considers the center of the universe. So anything that is anything that is made of earth will gravitate towards the center of the earth. The next element that will gravitate towards the center of the earth is water, which will rest upon the earth. And the next element that will be attracted, everything is attracted towards the earth. The next element will be air, and on top of that will be fire. Ve'en halucham lo b'da'atam v'lo b'cheftzam ela minhag shenikba bahem v'teva shenivta bahem. Their course is not due to their intelligence and not to their desire, but to a rule fixed in them and to nature which is engendered in them. In other words, we were taught that the celestial bodies have an intelligence, an innate intelligence, and a knowledge of what they are. But these essential ingredients that make up all the matter that we see around us does not have its own intelligence or its own awareness of itself, and it has no free will to act as it wants. But they have fixed rules of nature that they must adhere to, and they do adhere to, but they are like the building blocks, the spiritual building blocks of all matter. Teva ha'esh cham vayavesh v'hu kal mikulam. By nature, fire is warm and dry, and therefore lighter than all of them. V'haruach cham v'lach, and the air is warm and moist. V'hamayim karim v'lachim, and water is cool and moist. V'ha'aretz yevesha v'kara, and earth is dry and cool. V'hi kveda mikulam v'hamayim kalim mimena v'fichach nimtzaim lema'ala ala aretz, and it is heavier than all of them. Water is lighter than it, therefore it is its place above the earth. V'haruach kal min hamayim v'fichach hu merachef al pnei hamayim, and air is lighter than water, therefore it is placed above water. V'ha'esh kal min haruach, and fire is lighter than air. So again, let's imagine this as a ball. There's the middle. There is let's say a golf ball, which is earth. Surrounding the golf ball is the next heaviest element, which is water. Resting on top of the water is air, which is lighter than water, and resting on top of the air is fire. But you can imagine what they mean here is it's like a spherical ball that has layers, starting with a single sphere of earth, which is the heaviest, which is the center of gravity, so to speak. ומפני שהם יסודות לכל גופים שתחת הרקיע, יימצא כל גוף וגוף מאדון ובהמה וחיה עוף ודג וצמח ומתכת ואבן גלמו מחובה ואש ורוח ומים ועופר. And because they are elements for all bodies beneath the expanse, it is found that each and every body, whether of man, beasts, animal, fowl and fish, or whether of plant, mineral and stone, is unformed matter. Its unformed matter is a fusion of these elements: fire, air, water, and earth. Again, Rambam reminding us that everything that we see around us, whatever it is, a fish, fowl, stone, or animal, or human, are a combination of these of matter that is formed from these four elements. Va'arba'atan yit'avru b'yachad v'yishtanu kol echad mehem be'etz ha'eruv ad she'imtza ha'mechuba me'arba'atan eno domeh le'echad mehen kshehu levado. The four elements too fuse together, so that each of them loses identity when such fusion takes place, so that the fused element of the four of them becomes unlike one of them when it is by itself. The Rambam is saying here that everything ultimately fuses with another, or is a combination of another, and once earth is mixed with fire, it gains a new identity that is nothing like its essence as it was originally. It becomes a new form, and it's considered a new identity. ואין במעורב מהן אפילו חלק אחד שהוא אש מפני עצמו, או מים מפני עצמם, או ארץ מפני עצמה, או רוח מפני עצמה, אלא הכל נשתנו ונעשו גוף אחד. And in such fused body, there is not even one particle which is actual fire, or actual water, or actual earth, or actual air, for all were transformed and made into one body. So they're not found in isolation in their individual forms anywhere in nature. They are only found as combinations of these four elements, everything that we see around us. כל גוף וגוף המחובר מארבעתן יימצא בו קר וחום לח ויבש כאחד. And in each and every such fused body of the four, there are coolness, heat, moisture, and drought or dryness combined. אבל יש מהן גופים שיהיה בהם חזקה מיסוד האש כמו בעלי נפש. Nevertheless, there are amongst them certain bodies in which the element of fire is strongest, as in living creatures. So Rambam is stating here that the ratios are not always equal. In fact, they're probably never equal. They're always, some may be a majority of fire or a majority of earth, depending on what it is. Perhaps mountains have a majority earth element as opposed to the lightness of fire, and humans, living creatures, would have a majority of fire, as they are, living creatures, so to speak. Lefichach yira'eh bahem hachom yoter. Therefore, the element of heat is more apparent in them. This Rambam is referring to living creatures, like mammals perhaps, or human beings. ויש מהם גופים שיהיה בהם חזקה מסוד הארץ כמו האבנים, לפיכך יראה בהם היובש הרבה. And there are amongst them bodies where the element of earth is strongest, as in stones. Therefore, the element of drought or dryness is most prominent in them. ויש מהם גופים שיהיה בהם חזקה מיסוד המים, לפיכך יראה בהם הלך יותר. And there are amongst them bodies wherein the element of water is strongest, therefore the element of moisture is more apparent. Rambam is reminding us how the different elements have different attributes to them. Heat is dry, and heat has dryness to it. Water has moist, has a preponderance of moistness. In this manner, it happens that one warm body is warmer than another warm body. And one dry body more dry than another body. So there are various levels. All the different ratios produce different levels of dryness or wetness or heat or so on. V'chein yimtzeu gufim sheyireh bahem hakor bilvad. So are found bodies where only cold alone appears. V'gufim yireh bahem halach bilvad, and bodies where the moisture alone appears. Or hachom v'halach ke'echad b'shaveh, and bodies where the cold and the dryness appear evenly balanced. Lefi rav hayotzed shehu shehaya be'ikar hatar'avet yireh ma'aseh oto hayesod v'tiv'o b'guf ham'orav. Or the cold, or where the cold and according to the size of the quantity of the ratio, which was the fundamental element for the fusion, will the action of that element and its nature appear in the fused body. So, if the fundamental element was heat or fire, it's likely that that preponderance, that fiery preponderance, would appear in its completed matter. Is what I kind of glean from that. Halacha 3. V'chol ha'mechubad me'arba yesodot eluhu nifrad basof. All things fused of the four elements terminate in dissolution. Here we are, Rambam is surprisingly bringing this very technical concept of entropy, how things over time fall away from their highest concentration, the entropic theory of energy in perhaps a closed system. We know that anything left in the elements will ultimately crumble and fall away. This is the entropic. Anything left in a system will ultimately degenerate or corrupt into a lower form of energy. This is the entropy. He mentions it here. Yeshehu nifrad le'acha yamim achadim. In some instances, this entropy will be in a few days. Yeshehu nifrad le'acha shanim rabot. In others, such dissolution will come to pass after many years. So, for example, if there is a carrot has been created in a field, it may return to the earth after a few weeks or a few days, but a mountain will dissolve in many years. And he continues, V'chol shenis chaber mehem efshar shelo yipared lahem. But all that which was fused by them cannot avoid dissolution back into them. So Rambam is saying that any combinations of earth, water, fire and wind will eventually break down back into their individual elements. It's just a matter of time. Afilu hazahav v'ha'odem efshar shelo yipased v'yachazor lisodosav. Even gold and platinum cannot avoid termination and the return to the elements. So Rambam is stating even the most rare and tough elements, tough matter, will eventually follow this rule of entropy to its basic four elements. Yoshuv miktzatol la'esh, or miktzatol la'mayim, or miktzatol la'ruach, or miktzatol la'oretz. The process of such return is parts to fire, parts to water, parts to air, and parts to earth or dust. It uses the term dust here. Halacha 4. Hoyel v'chol hanifsad yipored lisodot elu lama ne'emar la'odom ve'el afar toshuv. Since all that must terminate, dissolve into these elements, he quotes Odom ve'el afar toshuv, and into dust you shall return. This is from Bereshis chapter 3 verse 19. Lefi shirov minyono min ha'afar, because the greatest part of his structure, the structure of Odom, is dust or earth, so to speak. V'lo kol nifrad keshifar said miyad yachzor le'arba hayesodot. And not all that undergo this dissolution when they dissolve, return at once to the four elements. So, I'll finish this off. Ela yipased v'yachazol lidvar echad v'davar echa lidvar acha v'sof ha'dvarim yachzol yisodos v'nimtzu kol ha'dvarim chozrim chalila. For they dissolve gradually. One thing will be turned into another, that other into still another, and in the end, those things return to the elements, and thus it is discovered that all things turn in a circle. So, we, after 120 years, if we're buried in the ground, our bodily matter may nourish other creatures that live underground, or they will perhaps nourish plants that are grown in a similar area, and those will turn into nourishment for animals. It will feed the animals. Matter will form upon the animals. Those animals will die and decompose into the earth, and the nutrients will be soaked up and then given off to another creation. This is what Rambam is saying. There's a circle of life, and once there is this combination of these four elements and they're turned into matter, it doesn't necessarily mean when they decompose they go back immediately to the four elements. They can transform into a combination of elements that may continually revolve in this so-called circle of life, of generation and degeneration. Halacha 5. Arba Yesodot ha'elu mishtanim zeh lazeh tomid b'chol yom u'v'chol sha'a miktzatan lo kol gufan. The four elements perpetually change into one another, partially and not bodily. Ketzad, how is this so? Miktzat ha'aretz hakrova min hamayim mishtanes u'misporeres v'na'aseis mayim. Part of the earth nearest the water breaks and changes, and it becomes water. V'chol miktzat hamayim hasmuchim l'ruach mishtanim u'masmesin v'hovin ruach. So does part of the water nearest the air evaporate and change and become air. וכן הרוח מקצתו הצמוך לאש משתנה ומסחולל ונעשה אש. And so does part of the air nearest the fire shift and change and become fire. וכן האש מקצתה הצמוח לרוח מסחולל משתנה ומשכנס ונעשה רוח. And so does part of the fire nearest air shift and change, solidify and become air. So Rambam is saying the border elements, that the parts of earth and water that rub together, so to speak, will eventually turn into the next element. Earth will turn into water, water will turn into air, where it borders the air, the element of air, and also air where it borders the element of fire will turn into fire. וכן הרוח מקצתו הצמוך למים משתנה ומתכנס ונעשה מים. So does part of the nearest so does part of the air nearest to the water change, solidify or become water. וכן המים מקצתו הצמוך לארץ משתנה ומתכנס ונעשה ארץ. So does part of the water nearest the earth change, clots and becomes earth. ושינוי זה מעט מעט לפי אורך הימים, but the change is little by little in proportion to the lapse of time. ואין כל היסוד משתנה עד שיעשה כל המים רוח וכל הרוח אש. Neither does an element change completely so that all the water will become air or all the air fire. שאי אפשר שיבטל אחד מן היסודות הארבע, because it is impossible that one of these four elements should be entirely nullified. אלא מקצת ישתנה מאש לרוח ומקצת ישתנה מרוח לאש. But part of the fire does become air and part of the air does become fire. וכן בין כל אחד וחברו יימצא השינוי בין ארבעתן וחוזרות חלילה לעולם. and so between each and the other, and thus change will be found amongst the four, and so it turns into a circle forever. So it's not exactly black and white where and how these kind of transformations between the elements take place, but perhaps this is giving a little bit of a indication to the theory of conservation of energy, where there is a fixed amount of energy and matter in the universe, and basically all that's going on is that nothing is being created or destroyed, but everything is transforming into the other and back to another, and as it says, as Rambam says, so turns in a circle forever. V'shinui, halacha 6, V'shinui zeh yihye basvivat hagalgel u'mitzvirato yischabru arbatan v'yihye mehen sha'a galmei. This change is made possible by the revolution of the sphere and by the force of its revolution on the four elements that derive power of fusion, and out of them other bodies. So I think what Rambam means here is the sphere that he's talking about is the ninth sphere. Now the ninth sphere is what I understand is like it's the powerhouse that drives the elements together. It's like the mixing spoon for matter and energy, and these four elements to continually have this whirlpool of transformation and mixing. Perhaps it could be related to something like gravity that kind of gives that swirling energy that is needed to vivify these four elements and matter. Bnei Adam v'nefesh v'chaya tzemech v'even u'matechet. Sons of man, living creature, plant, stone, and mineral are included within this fusion. V'ha'el noten l'kol gelem v'gelem tzura ruah lo al yidei malach ha'asiri shehi ha'tzura ha'nikret ishim. To each and every body, Hashem gives a due form through the angel of the 10th sphere, the intelligence called men, Ishim. And I think it's quoted in Midrash Bereshis Rabbah 10:6. Every blade of grass is given an angel that tells it you must grow. That's a very famous saying. This is what it's calling. That angel are these Ishim, which is, remember, from the second parak, is the 10th and lowest form of angel. The angels that also communicate with Nevi'im, also instruct how each type of matter is to grow. Halacha 7. La'olam einata roeh gelem below tzura or tzura below gelem. You never see a body without form, or a form without a body. So body and form, we're talking here, body is the physical matter, and form is the thing that describes it in a spiritual sense. For example, a rock, the form of it would be, it has colour, it has hardness, and it is heavy. And the matter is what makes up that object. Ela lev ha'adam hu shemachalek guf hanimtza b'da'ato v'yodea shehu mechuba megolem v'tzura. It is only the heart of man which divides a given body conceived in his mind and knows that it is fused of matter and form. So this is an abstract view of reality that these things exist in nature. You know, what we see around us is conceived by our minds to be what appears in our minds. And Rambam is saying here, in the heart of man, you are the one who contemplates a tree and understands it to be a tree, but essentially it's a mass of these. It's a combination of four elements with some sort of form to give it that shape, and we conceive it when we look at it as a tree, so to speak. ויודע שיש שם גופים שגלמם מכובד מארבעת היסודות. And he also knows that there are bodies whose unformed matter is fused of these four elements. וגופים שגלמל פשוט ואינו מחובר מגולם אחר, and bodies whose unformed matter is plain, unfused, and all of but one element. והצורות שאין להם גולם אינם נראים לעין. The forms which are not of matter and are not visible to the eye, אלא באין הלב הן ידועון, כמו שידענו אדם הכל בלא ראיית עין, but are known to the heart's eye, as we know like Hashem, without seeing him in the eye. I think what Rambam is referring to here are for example, the Ishim. These are Malachim, these are angels without matter, but are composed of complete soul or spirit, and they are perceptible to man's eye of the heart. In the same way that we feel Hashem, we feel Hashem, but he's invisible to us. We feel him with our heart's eye. Rambam is referring to entities that exist, that don't have matter, that we are unable to see, like Ishim. The Rambam mentions in Perek 2 that the Ishim, which is the lowest form of angels, communicate messages to man, or Nevi'im, but they are without form. But a Novi would be able to feel them and hear them in his the eye of his heart, so to speak, which is a very rare form of comprehension that a very high level of person would have or would discover within himself if he achieved the status of a Novi. Halacha 8. Nefesh kol basar hi tzuroto shenatan lo ha'el v'hadas hei Torah hamtsuya b'nafsho shel odom hi tzurat ha'odom hashalem b'da'ato. The soul of all flesh is the form which God gave unto him, and the high intelligence which is found in the soul of man is the form of the man who is perfectly intelligent. Sometimes we say that the flesh represents the soul. Is just a kind of a manifestation of the soul of the person. And it's Rambam continues. Ve'al tzura zu ne'ema b'Torah na'aseh adam v'tzelmeinu kidmusenu. Concerning this form, it is said in the Torah from Genesis 1:26, "Let us make man in our form, after our image." Kaloma shetihia lo tzura hayodaas u'miseget hadeas she'en lahem golem. As if saying that he should possess a form which knows and attains intelligences which have no body. Perhaps this is also referring to, this is right, Kamo hamalachim shehem tzura below golem ad sheidma lahen. As angels, as for example angels which are forms without a body, thereby being like unto them. So I think what Rambam is saying here, that we have the ability to perceive these entities that are around us, that are invisible to us, through our heart's eye, so to speak, as essentially we are, similar in some ways to an angel, because we have this spirit inside us which is similar, but we're on a kind of different level to them. But we can perceive them. Humans were created to be able to perceive these other entities. Vienna Omer al tzura zu hanekeret le'enayim shehi hapeh v'hachotem v'haltzantot v'sa'ar roshem haguf shezu Torah Shema. But it is not spoken of a given form which is recognized by the eyes as the mouth or the nose or the cheekbones or any other description of the body, for such is the name of its shape. Ve'eino hanefesh hametzuya l'chol nefesh chaya sheba ochel v'shoteh u'molid u'margish u'maharher. Neither does it apply to the life of living creatures by which it can eat, drink, reproduce, feel and ponder. Ela hadea shehi tzurat hanefesh, uvatzurat hanefesh hakosuv midaber batzelmenu kidmusenu. But it is concerning the intelligence, which is the form of the soul. For it is about the form of the soul that the verse speaks, in our form and after our image. So I think Rambam is mentioning this higher form of soul, which is, particularly Rambam calls it the nefesh, not the neshama. The neshama Rambam refers to as the animal soul, which is the soul that kind of electrifies our body.
Nefesh Bahamit is called.
Yeah, but in particular, Rambam has a switch. Normally it's referred to as neshama, but Rambam refers to the higher, God's soul, which is above that sort of electric soul that vivifies the body, this nefesh, which is a higher, this is the intelligence, is the power of reason that only humans have. Rambam he refers to it as a nefesh. Other places refer to that as the neshama, but Rambam in particular refers to that element of the soul as the nefesh. Our form, like it says, in our form after our image, it is mentioned. Oftentimes this form is called soul and the breath of life. And therefore it is necessary to take care in naming them so that man will not err in such. But each and every name one will learn from the subject therefore. So let's talk about this nefesh, this higher, godly, divine element of our soul. We know that we've discussed this actually in Shmona Prokim and other places. The subsections of the soul. We are talking about now the highest part of the neshama, the nefesh. Let's talk about it now. Halacha 9. Ein surat hanefesh hazot mechoberet min hayesodot kedei shetipared lahem. The form of this soul is not composed of the elements, like the four elements, to be separated and become part of them. So when the human body dies, the so-called neshama, or rather the nefesh, does not degenerate. The nefesh is the eternal part of a human being. Ve'ena mikorach haneshama ad shetiyeh tzuricha lenshama kmo shenshama tzuricha laguf. And it is not an offshoot of the power of the soul to be dependent upon a soul, as well as the soul is dependent upon the body. So, I think this is the higher form of the soul, is considered this nefesh that is not dependent on the body. If the body dies, this nefesh, as opposed to the neshama is the vivifying electrical system sort of thing that keeps us alive, but this nefesh is a higher form that belongs to God, as well, obviously, as well as the neshama, but this nefesh is unique in its divine quality. Ela me'et Hashem min hashamayim hi, but this form is from the Lord from heaven. Lefichach shipared hagolem shehu mechuba min hayisodos v'to'avad haneshama mipnei she'ena mitzuya ela im haguf v'tzricha laguf b'chol ma'aseh lo tachwet hatzura hazot. Therefore, when the body, which is composed of the four elements, dissolves and the spirit of life is lost, that means the spirit of life he refers to as neshama, because it is non-existing save only when in the body and is dependent upon the body and all but its functions, this form, the nefesh, will not be cut off. לפי שאינה צריכה לנשמה במעשיה, אלא יודעת ומשיגת הדייס הפרודות מן הגמלים ויודעת בורא כל ועומדת לעולם ולעולמי עולמים. For it is not dependent upon a soul in its functions, but does know and attain all intelligence which are independent of matter, and knows Hashem, the creator of all, and lives forever and throughout all worlds. So again, this nefesh that Rambam is referring to is this divine element of our being, and it is not dependent on the neshama, which is the vivifying soul, or the ruach, but it lives eternally, and it is and knows Hashem because it's part of Hashem. And it continues, Hu she'amar Shlomo b'chachmato. This is what Solomon said in his wisdom from Koheles. He said, "Vayoshav ha'ofa ala oretz keshahoya ha'ruach toshuv el ha'elohim asher natana," and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit unto God who gave it. So, please God, after 120 years, the neshama and the ruach will return, will have its own ending, but the nefesh, which God gave to us, will return to Him, hopefully in a pristine, or as pristine a manner as we can muster. Halacha 10. כל הדברים האלו שדיברנו בעניין זה, כמה מדלי הם ודברים עמוקים הם. All these matters we spoke of on this subject are but a drop in the bucket, but they are very deep matters. אבל אינם כעניין עומק פרק ראשון ושני, but they are not of the same depth as the subject in chapters 1 and 2. So very interesting text that Rambam points out. He says these matters that we speak about are but a drop in the bucket. If we look back at chapter 2, halacha 12, he says a similar statement. These subjects are but a drop in the ocean. But here he says these are ma'aseh bereshis, or what we're talking about here, not a drop in the bucket, but ma'aseh merkava, which we discussed in the first 2 prakim, he regards as a drop in the ocean. So you can see the difference in depth between those 2 subjects. And also he continues, ובאור כל אלו הדברים שבפרק שלישי ורביעי הוא נקרא מעשה בראשית. The exposition of all these matters in chapters 3 and 4 is called מעשה בראשית, or cosmogony. וכל ציווי החכמים הראשונים שאין דורשים בדברים האלו ברבים, אלא לאחד ואחד מודיעין דברים אלו ומלמדין אותם. Therefore, the chachamim of old times were charged not to sermonize on these matters before the multitudes, but to impart them to one man and instruct him therein. So we are told to, like we were told in the second parak, this Ma'aseh Merkavah must not be told to the multitude, and must only be taught one-on-one to an absolutely qualified person that's capable of understanding these subjects, and is certified able to, because we know that they are very, very deep. But there's a slightly different, this Ma'aseh Bereshis has a slightly different quality about it. Halacha 11, Oma ben inyan Ma'aseh Merkavah le'inyan Ma'aseh Bereshis. And where is the difference between the subject of the works of the chariots and the subject of Ma'aseh Bereshis? She'inyan Ma'aseh Merkavah afilu le'echad ein doshim bo ela im kein haya chacham or mevin medato mosrin lo rosheh prakim. The subject of the Ma'aseh Merkavah, or works of the chariots, should not be imparted even to an individual unless he is a scholar endowed with a reasoning power of his own, and then only the headings of each chapter may be transmitted to him. V'inyan Ma'aseh Bereshis melamdim oto liyachid Af al pi she'eno mevin oto mida'ato u'mo'odin oto kol ma sheyachol leida b'dvarim elu. Whereas the subject of Ma'aseh Bereshis, the study of creation, may be imparted to an individual, even though he may not be endowed with reasoning power of his own, it is permissible to teach him all that he is capable of knowing concerning these matters. So, olama ein malamdim otom lerabim. If so, why not give public instructions? לפי שאין כל אדם שיש לו דעת רחבה להשיג פירוש ומאור כל הדברים al biryan, because not every man is endowed with a broad understanding to understand the explanations and elucidation of all the text correctly. So even though they are of a lesser esoteric quality, Maaseh Bereshis is of a less esoteric quality, it can be explained, it can be taught to individuals, but you must be careful because they're still pretty difficult subject and they could be misconstrued publicly especially. Halakha 12. Bizman she'adam mitvonen b'dvarim ha'elu u'makir kol habruim. When man contemplates concerning these things and perceives all creatures, whether angel, a sphere as we mentioned, or man in the likeness of himself, of God, he discovers the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all beings of form and all creatures. Motzif ahava lamakom v'timsa nafsho v'ichama bisro le'ohev v'makom Baruch Hu. His love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu increases, and his soul and body thirst to yearn and love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'yireh v'yifchad b'shfiloso v'daluso v'kaluso kishiariach atzmo le'echad me'gufos shekodashim hagdolim, and he will fear and be nervous because of his own insignificance when he ponders these Maaseh Bereshis and obviously Maaseh Merkavah, and he will perhaps perceive his shortcomings, and perhaps a fear will seize him when comparing himself to one of the great and holy bodies. V'chol sheken la'achat ha'mehatzurot hathorot v'hanifradot min haglamim shelo nischabru megolem klal. So he may become nervous when he admires these celestial, and he puts it, Rambam says, holy bodies, so that the pure form separated from bodies of clay, which never joins a body of clay. V'yimtza atzmo shehu kli molei bishra v'chilma reik v'choseh. He will then find himself likened to a vessel full of shame and disgraced, empty and wanting. So Rambam is saying here, when man, who is considered like a body of clay, observes the celestial spheres and the celestial movements, and even down to our world, the matters of forms of all creation, he will suddenly realize, my God, this is incredible what God has created. Even when he just cursively looks from the outside at creation without looking at the internal structures of mammals and fish and trees, just from the outside he will wonder at creation. Kal v'chomer, when he looks at it as a scientist would, from the interior of all the processes of photosynthesis and how everything is one unity and everything is attached to one another, he will suddenly think, I'm just like a small, insignificant being in this wonderful Gan Eden of creation, and he will be awestruck by the power of creation, and he will find himself almost nervous and fearful of the handiwork of God. Halacha 13. וענייני 4 פרקים אלו שבחמש מצוות האלו הם שהחכמים הראשונים קוראים אותו פרדס. The subjects in these 4 chapters of these 5 commandments, the first 5 commandments that we are analyzing, are the same which the early sages speak of as pardes or vineyards. We know this story of Pardes.
The Gemara in Chagiga.
Yes.
Daf Yud Dalet Amud Aleph or Beit Ted Vav around that.
Yeah. Where 4 great Rabbonim.
Rabbi Akiva,
Acher.
Who was Elisha ben Avuya,
Yeah.
and Ben Zoma, and Ben Ben Azai.
Ben Azai. So these four great Rabbonim entered the subject, so to speak. They're called vineyard, paradise. I think paradise also is an acronym for Perush, Remez.
Peshat, Remesh, Darush, and Sod.
Yes. So it's a allegorical vineyard, and it is supposed to represent the investigation into these four chapters, these four scientific kind of elements, or that are also mirrored by metaphysical matches in heaven. So it's a very, very deep subject. And what happened? That but each one of them had a different outcome.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I always get mixed up between Ben Azai and Ben Zoma. One of them went mad. One of them died.
One of them detached himself from religion,
that was
which is
Acher.
Acher. And Rabbi Akiva was the only one who actually came out of this
Shalem.
investigation in peace.
Yeah.
And I've read in a separate document that one of the reasons why he came out of it in peace was that he actually accepted his understanding as limited, and didn't allow himself to be caught up in the depth of these things, because these things are way beyond human comprehension, and if you throw yourself in, you may not be able to get out of this pit, so to speak.
He warned them. He said, "Be careful of the." What I think he said, the ice, the glow, the brilliant ice. Well, who knows what that means?
Yeah.
But he was warning them that there are things there you will not understand, and that's
exactly.
where Acher tripped up.
So Rabbi Akiva knew his limitations, and he said, "As far I cannot investigate further, so I will not investigate further, and I will go on to the next thing." And he went around the vineyard, so to speak, and he survived. And that perhaps is a lesson for us: is these things are so deep. And Rambam continues. He tells us how to deal with this. So as it's mentioned, like you say in Chagiga 14, 4 entered the vineyard. Even though these great men were great men of Israel and great scholars, hayu lo kulam haya bahem koach leida olasig kol advarim al buryan. Not all of them had the intellectual power to know and grasp all these matters clearly. ואני אומר שאין רואי לטייל בפרדס אלא מי שנתמלא כרסו לחם ובשר. And I say that no one is deserving to stroll in this paradise vineyard unless he be filled with intellectual bread and meat. ולחם ובשר הוא לידה היסור והמותר וכיוצא בהם misar hamitzvos. This meat, this bread and meat, this is to say, one must know what is forbidden and what is permitted, and similar to these of the rest of the commandments. And so Rambam is saying here that before you attempt to stroll in this holy vineyard, you must be prepared. You must fill your stomach with the knowledge of Torah and the commandments, and you will be better. You're better protected against the perhaps the pitfalls of investigating such holy and deep subjects. You may be able to have a better a chance at coming out like Rabbi Akiva did in one piece. V'afal pi shedvarim elu devar katan, and although these matters were pronounced by sages as of a lesser importance, koru otan chachamim shaharei amru chachamim devar gadol me'aseh merkava u'devar katan havayot da'abaya v'rabba. And although these matters were pronounced by sages as of a lesser importance, for they said a great matter is ma'aseh merkava, the works of the chariot, and a small matter is the controversies between Avaya and Rabbah. Afal pi ken wa'uin hen lahakdiman shehen meshivin da'ato shel adam tchila. Nevertheless, they have precedence as a study because they commence to compose man's minds. So Rambam is saying here, he's starting off with this serious thing. His first few chapters of his Mishneh Torah are of the most esoteric and powerful and deep subjects known to man, that are dangerous almost to investigate. But he's saying here, prepare yourself, investigate them, because they commence to compose man's mind. Maybe ultimately this is the destiny of a human being, is to approach these subjects, and maybe everything else is leading up to this. So he counts as one of his first instructions to a Jew is to familiarize yourself with this, because this is your destiny. This is perhaps what you're made to do. You're created to ultimately reach a level to investigate this paradise, so to speak. בעוד שהם טובה הגדולה שהשפיע הקדוש ברוך הוא ליישוב העולם הזה. Moreover, they are the store of great good which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has provided for the social existence of this world. כדי לנחול חיי העולם הבא, so that their life of the world to come may also be inherited. ואפשר שיודעים הכל קטן וגדול איש ואישה בעל לב רחב ובעל לב קצר, so that the life of the world to come may also be inherited and be accessible to all, little and great, men and women, to one of broad understanding as well as to one of lesser understanding. And basically that concludes the fourth perek of this Mishnah. And I hope, even though that was a very complicated and perhaps a bit unfamiliar, I hope perhaps this helps to lay the foundations of what we are supposed to be and learn in this world.
Fantastic. Wow, thank you very much, Michael. That was very, very difficult subject to tackle. I think you did it very, very well. You made it very, very user-friendly. I hope those out there listening gained as much, if not more, from what we gained here. And we'll be back next time. And please God, until then, have a wonderful and blessed week.